Ultimately, Monster Hunter games are designed to be things you sink many hours into. From the earliest games, you were meant to ascend the ranks, grind materials, and chase after the equipment you wanted for dozens or even hundreds of hours. Or perhaps thousands, you know who you are. Specifically though, the activities that you're meant to spend the most time on have changed over time. Generally, getting to the end of the main story in the game, whether that be the end of high rank or G rank, means you're sort of let off the leash. What you do from that point forward is up to you. It's this part of every game that has changed the most. The player has been given an increasing amount of direction and things to do and chase after even when the main section of the game is finished, to the point where the end of the game is actually the largest portion of it. This is the formation of the Endgame. So today, let's discuss endgames in Monster Hunter, the way they've taken shape and evolved throughout the series, and the impacts they have on the way the game is played. In Monster Hunter 1, you had 20 ranks and various quests that would become available to you based on those ranks. Once you reached 20, you were basically done with the game. All that was left for you to do was event quests, maybe unlock Fatalis if you haven't already met the requirements, and grind equipment. It's becoming something of a habit for me to say on this channel, but Monster Hunter 1 was largely inspired by older online RPGs. It makes a lot of sense then that this is what it offered at the end of the game. In many ways, the online RPGs of this time were basically just social platforms for you to hang out and grind in. The game's main experience was the progression through the ranks, and how much time you sunk into it beyond that was left entirely up to you. You had plenty of difficult-to-obtain equipment that would require many hours of grinding, but the game didn't direct you toward it. You could say the game trusted that if you had enjoyed the experience up to that point, you'd probably want to keep playing, and do the grinds as a matter of course. Monster Hunter 2 would see the addition of an endgame rank grind, where you can continue gaining ranks beyond the main story cap all the way up to 999. This didn't benefit you in any particular way, other than unlocking cosmetic name icons. However, for the most part, the so-called endgame stayed the same through all the first and second generation games. You beat the main part of the game, and then you could choose to grind out all the equipment you wanted at the end. Going into the third generation of games, though, this would begin to change. While Tri would largely carry over the same rank system as DOS, and Portable Third would keep the same style as the second generation portable games, 3 Ultimate brought a new type of endgame. Most of the game's main story worked like a portable game, where you go from one rank to the next via key quests and urgent quests. Once reaching the final rank, though, this would unlock a rank grind similar to what you would find in Monster Hunter 2 and 3. From the end of G rank all the way through to rank 100, you would continue to unlock new quests. These were mostly multi-monster quests and special boss monsters like Lucent Nargacuga or Abyssal Lagiacrus. These introduced a completely new goal to the end of the game. While the grind for equipment was still there, if you wanted to actually fight all of the monsters and be able to make some of the strongest gear in the game, you would also need to grind for ranks as well to unlock all the monsters in the game. Of course, these two things paired fairly well. For the most part, you could just get ranks while grinding for monster materials. It was a minor incentive that could make people want to keep playing a little more than they may have otherwise done in any previous game. Depending on how lucky you were with making your main sets, it may even spur you to start making additional sets and crafting additional weapons you don't typically use just to fill the time, until you unlock every monster. The 4th generation of games is where we started to see the more modern perception of an endgame take form. While this set of games also came with a post-game rank grind to unlock additional quests, the bulk of their endgame content was in ancillary systems. In 4 Ultimate, you had guild quests. These special quests had to be obtained via several means, such as fighting monsters on expeditions to the Everwood. These quests would have levels associated with them that indicated their difficulty. Completing the quests would increase its level, which would affect the monster's stats, as well as other parameters on the quest like making the monster frenzied or adding invaders. While doing quests in the Everwood, you would also obtain relic equipment. These relics would have random stats on them based on the level of the quest you got it from. It was possible for these to end up being quite powerful if you got lucky. Speaking of frenzied monsters, this was also tied into the endgame system. At the end of the game, you could fight powered-up monsters called apexes that were significantly stronger than their normal counterparts, and required a special item called a Y-Stone to help you suppress their power. By fighting these powered-up monsters, you could then utilize the final endgame system of augmentation. Using items you got from the Apex quests, you could power up your equipment beyond their normal upgrade trees and levels to become significantly more powerful. As you can see, the transition from 3rd gen to 4th gen was quite abrupt. Now there's practically a whole new game unlocked once you reach the end of the main story. This is where you can really see a clear line drawn between the main game and the post-game. If you were to try playing 4 Ultimate like you may have played a game like Monster Hunter 2, you would actually just miss out on a ton of content. It's not really enough to just farm up a bit of gear and be done with it. Now you need to grind rank to unlock all the monsters, grind guild quests to get the best relic equipment, grind apexes to max out your augments. Of course, none of this is mandatory, as always, but there is a very clear shift in design, where the game certainly tries to lead you toward having more and more things to do. Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate acted as a sort of blueprint for all future games. Looking through 5th gen, you see many familiar faces. Powered-up monsters with special drops for the best gear, augments, gear with random stats, systems upon systems layered to create incentives to continue playing for longer amounts of time. Now that we have our history out of the way, I think there's a lot to unpack in regards to the trends of the series' endgames. Not least of which is the fact that the modern games are live services. Monster Hunter games since World receive seasonal updates which add new monsters and other content. They also come with a variety of microtransactions, and of course eventually lead up to the expansion, release, or a new game. When cast in this light, the endgame systems actually can look somewhat predatory. It's the standard live service playbook. If you can keep people engaged for longer, they're more likely to spend money and continue spending money. This is a profit incentive in making the endgames robust and full of things that make you want to keep playing and coming back with every new update. Whether you see this as a true dilemma or ethical concern is going to be subjective, but I feel it's worth pointing out in this discussion. Another factor to consider is that, frankly, much of the advent of endgame systems is actually somewhat spurred by community desire. These systems would not continue to exist if they weren't successful and well-liked, at least to some extent. Many people will even get mad if they're not present or robust enough. Look no further than Wilds to see this in action. At launch, Wilds offered only a fairly average grind for materials, and a grind for creating Artian weapons. This was met with much pushback, asking literally, why doesn't Wilds have an endgame? The situation with Wilds is more complex though, because tied up in it was also a desire for the endgame to be more challenging. Challenges in the endgame is nothing new, but they're generally relegated to powered-up monsters or specific event quests, or perhaps high levels of systems like guild quests or anomaly investigations from Sunbreak. And so due to all this feedback, Wilds has seen something of an overcorrection in its updates, with more monsters being thrown into newly created ranks that give monsters drastically increased stats, along with the addition of being able to obtain more powerful talismans from those higher ranks. This has created a messy, almost slapped-together feeling endgame. I think it's fairly obvious that they didn't intend for Wilds to have any robust endgame systems to start with in the base game. And that's actually normal. Monster Hunter 4 only had guild quests. The rest of its endgame systems didn't come until G rank. Monster Hunter World was devoid of almost any endgame systems until Iceborne came out and added augments and the Guiding Lands. Monster Hunter Rise as well featured only grinding materials and talismans until Sunbreak came out. All of which is plenty of content for hundreds of hours of gameplay if you want it, and harkens back to the days of old before endgame systems even existed. So in this way, Wilds was really just continuing the norm, but obviously expectations have changed. Perhaps it's just indicative of people having higher standards. Games are getting more expensive and demanding higher-end systems in order to run, and the expansions already have had these endgame systems for ages. So why not the base games too? At the same time, though, I wonder if maybe it's something of a vicious cycle. With the prevalence of live service games, people have gotten primed to expect more content being delivered faster, and in turn, this causes developers to feel pressured to meet this expectation, which further feeds the player desire. The situation with Wilds, I feel, may end up having consequences for its future. The increase of challenge has given rise to a level and rate of power creep the series has never seen before, with the endgame monsters being faster, more complex, and dealing more damage than you can often even find in G-rank games. Which calls into question, what is Wild's expansion going to look like? There's really only two scenarios I can think of. The monsters will have to go even further beyond to maintain the difficulty curve, or they'll have to do some sort of soft reset at the start of Master Rank. Neither one sounds very ideal. Not to mention the endgame systems themselves. Are they going to bring the new talisman system forward into the expansion, now probably in addition to various new systems added with the expansion? Or is it just going to get left in high rank as an abandoned era of the game's lifespan? If I had to guess what the main culprit behind this mess we're seeing in the modern day is, I'd say it may just be a result of inevitable growing pains that the series was going to have to deal with. We're only in the second generation since Monster Hunter exploded in popularity. There's many new players and many new expectations that developers are having to grapple with now. While Wilds largely did nothing outside the norm for Monster Hunter, perhaps the classic formulas are beginning to crack under the weight of the series' size nowadays. It's possible we could see some very radical changes in the future. But we're getting off topic. This is about endgames and their changes throughout time. I think throughout the series, endgame systems have felt a bit tacked on. The core loop was always supposed to be grinding as many monsters as you want for equipment, and then being satisfied with what you have and calling the game beaten. Every new endgame activity has basically just been drawing that process out longer and longer, and trying to incentivize it with new reward systems. And it works, honestly. It's probably not subtle that I prefer the older pre-endgame style, but despite that, I've still sunk hundreds of hours into the endgame systems of modern games. After how vast the content grind was in Iceborne and Sunbreak, I actually really enjoyed Wilds as a bit of a break. Being able to just make a bit of gear at the end, then call it a day was nice. That was of course short-lived as title updates have come out. There is one underestimated consequence of these systems, I think, which is a feeling of burnout. I know I felt this very strongly with Sunbreak on the anomaly grind. At some point, it can start to feel that you're no longer grinding for a specific reward or a goal, but rather just to progress a system until you can do the thing that you want to do, or obtain what you want to obtain. When there's materials or monsters locked behind a certain tier of progress, especially at the end, and you're just going through the motions until you can actually get to what you want. This isn't something that really existed prior to endgame systems. If you felt a sense of burnout, you were sort of just done playing the game. There wasn't anything else to do. Regardless, these systems are undeniably popular. The trend of the series has been increased popularity and an increased demand for more and more Monster Hunter content. I think in the future, we'll see more of the games designed warped around endgame-like systems, and maybe even integrating them deeper into the core gameplay loop, before you even get to the endgame. As for me, I'll always just enjoy a good old-fashioned, endless Rathalos plate grind. What do you think about endgame systems in Monster Hunter? Let me know in the comments. That's all from me for now. See ya.